Thank you for listening to the morning feed. Today we're going over a filing that was filed on June 14th of 2024 by Richard Alexander Murdaugh Jr. A lot of people know that name as Buster Murdaugh. His father, Alec Murdaugh, who went through a very, very high-profile trial. It was watched all around the country. It was watched internationally, with views online being into the millions collectively. As many people know, Buster Murdaugh's father was convicted of taking the lives of his wife and his son, which would be Buster Murdaugh's mother and brother, leaving Buster Murdaugh as his only surviving child. During that time, a focus shifted over to Buster Murdaugh, and we're going to go over that a little bit today. This filing is a defamation lawsuit against media, specifically Blackfin Incorporated, Warner Brothers Discovery Inc., Warner Brothers Entertainment Pages, Campfire Studios Inc., The Cinemart LLC, Netflix Inc., Gannett Company, which is also, we'll get into more of that later, and then Michael DeWitt Jr., who is very well known in the area of South Carolina. He has filled many different roles in his career. However, he is locally very notably known as the editor and publisher for the Hampton County Guardian. So we'll go over the filing in full in just a moment. I just want to briefly give a little bit of background here. We just went over who Buster's father is, and he is currently serving his prison sentence. So amid the investigation surrounding Buster's father, Alec, Buster faced his own name being brought up in connection to a completely different criminal investigation. The crimes of Alec Murdaugh, they brought to light a wave of hidden truth in South Carolina on multiple levels, and the questionable death of Stephen Smith became a topic of conversation as locals claimed that Buster Murdaugh was implicated in Stephen's death. So in 2015, a man who was driving his vehicle noticed a body on the side of the road, and he called authorities to report what he saw. Authorities responded, and they found the body of a young blonde-haired man named Stephen Smith. His death would eventually later be determined a hit and run, until the crimes of Alec Murdaugh began to surface. Bloggers, podcasters, many locals, independent news, that type of movement presented different facts about the Stephen Smith case, but they did it in conjunction with the crimes of Alec Murdaugh. The claims that Buster is connected to Stephen's death have always been denied by Buster himself, and currently the factual basis of the claims does not appear to have great significance, at least in relation to Stephen's death. Now, Buster has spoken to media about these claims, and after multiple podcasters, documentaries, social media posts, bloggers, they've continued to associate his name with the investigation into the death of Stephen Smith. Stephen's case deserves a second look, and that is absolutely without question. And allegedly, South Carolina law enforcement is indeed giving it a second look, and has admitted that perhaps the full story is not yet known. His case deserves a factual investigation, factual reporting, factual advocacy. Using the Murdaugh name to further his case isn't even necessary. There is a vast community of advocates who are passionate about cases like Stephen, and just the unsolved nature, just the nature of who Stephen was as a person, his kind spirit that people often speak to, and his he wanted to do something. He felt like he had a purpose, and he wanted to fulfill it. And he didn't get to do that. And a lot of people are passionate about helping families and victims that fall within a category where you feel like, they're essentially the underdog in this big situation that they have no ability to control without the help of a proper investigation. So the crimes of Alec Murdaugh rightfully attracted a lot of attention from local citizens, national and international media, trial watchers, advocates for justice, from the murders of his wife and son to the horrific crimes that he committed against people who trusted him, with legal proceedings that were involved with devastating circumstances where families were relying on that money in order to get money from personal injury settlements to take care of their family members. And it wasn't because he didn't win in court, but because he pocketed the money. There are over 100 crimes that he committed against people. Buster Murdaugh has never been connected to any of these crimes or any unrelated crimes that we're aware of. Many of the media platforms that reported on the details of Alec Murdaugh's crimes later began reporting on Stephen Smith's unsolved investigation. But the overall narrative and depictions of Buster, at times they appeared targeted and defamatory. No other names in the Stephen Smith case have gotten any amount of the attention that Buster's name has. The media defamation lawsuit was filed against, like I said, Blackfin, Warner Brothers Media Pages, Campfire Studios, the Cinemart, Netflix, Gannett, Michael DeWitt Jr. The comments about the lawsuit commonly seem to focus on what the discovery process will look like and how dauntingly uncomfortable it might be. Comments have also surfaced by the Stephen Smith family attorney about how Buster might feel about being deposed for questioning about Stephen Smith. It's really highly unlikely, though, that Buster's legal counsel has not thoroughly informed him of what to expect, especially from media attorneys. But Buster has already spoken multiple times about where he was at the time of Stephen's death and if he had any connection to Stephen. It seems really far-fetched that this round of questioning would be any more daunting than the last several years have been. Now, we have no idea. No one knows what happened to Stephen Smith. What I can say is we also have no idea if Buster had anything to do with it. It does not appear that he did. However, no one knows. So no one should be depicting or reporting it to appear that way when multiple names have been brought up in relation to the death of Stephen Smith. There is a burden to prove the defamation itself, how it caused harm, what level it rose to. Considering the fallout of the claims made against him, it would be reasonable to think that Buster could certainly prove the harmful nature of the defamation if, in fact, he can prove the defamation. Hampton County is very favorable towards plaintiffs in civil lawsuits. I would even say one of the most favorable in the nation. This lawsuit does have a possibility of being moved to a federal court. For now, it's been filed in Hampton County, and for the time being, that's where it will reside. So on our website, we have posted a timeline for the case, for the lawsuit. We will post updates there. You can go to our Patreon and see the documents, the raw documents themselves, save them if you want to, download them, whatever you want to do with it. Now we're going to get into the actual filing. So again, this was filed on June 14th, and here is what it says. So it says that the plaintiff, which would be Buster Murdaugh, the plaintiff alleges that the defendant Blackfin is a corporation organized and existing under the laws of New York with its principal place of business in New York, but it is subject to the jurisdiction of the court by reason of doing business in South Carolina and by the commission of the below described wrongful acts. Defendant Blackfin Inc. has transacted and engaged in a persistent course of business within this state, referring to South Carolina, sent its agents into the state to collect information and create artistic work, derive substantial revenue from goods and services consumed in the state, entered contracts to be formed in this state or to be performed in this state, and produced goods with the reasonable expectation they would be used or consumed in this state, all in the process of producing some of the artistic works that give rise to the cause of action described herein. Again, they're trying to keep this in the state of South Carolina and specifically in this county. The defendant, Warner Brothers Discovery Inc., is a corporation organized and existing under the laws of Delaware. Now, it goes over basically the same thing, that its principal place of business is New York, but they are also doing business in South Carolina. We go down to point number 4 here, defendant Warner Brothers Discovery. Again, same verbiage here, that they have also derived substantial revenue from goods and services in the state. Point number 5, they mention Warner Media Entertainment pages, and that they are under the existing laws of Georgia, and that their principal place of business is Georgia. However, they also were doing business in South Carolina, and specifically in relation to the alleged acts that they're going to name in this lawsuit. So they go over and they mention all of these defendants are elsewhere, but they're doing business in South Carolina. They go all the way down to, you make it down to like point 17, with them mentioning all of these various businesses without going through that painful verbiage. We'll skip over here to number 16, where it mentions defendant Michael M. DeWitt Jr. Now, it also mentions that his residence is South Carolina, and that is true. He is an editor and publisher there for the Hampton County Guardian, and he is very well known in the area and elsewhere outside of the South Carolina area. So his residence is in South Carolina, and I think that they're hoping that will help keep this in South Carolina, and specifically in Hampton County. So now we get into the actual complaint starting here, and this is just an initial complaint, but this is where we actually get into the wording for that. On July 8th, 2015, Stephen Smith, whose car had given out of gas, was walking along a rural route in Hampton, South Carolina, Hampton County. It was late at night. As he was walking along the road, he was allegedly struck by a part of a vehicle and killed. News sources now report his death is being considered by a statewide grand jury, and the media has reported on individuals unrelated to plaintiff allegedly being involved in his death. The plaintiff, even though he has been falsely accused of harming Stephen Smith, as described below, has not been notified by any law enforcement entities of any allegations against him related to Stephen Smith's death. On or about June 17th, 2022, defendant Warner Brothers Discovery began streaming and broadcasting a series called Murdaugh Murders, Deadly Dynasty, throughout the entire country, including South Carolina, through its platform Discovery Plus and the Investigation Discovery television channel, which falsely suggests and subtly accuses the plaintiff of being the murderer of Stephen Smith. During a 10-minute segment of the Murdaugh Murders Deadly Dynasty series, the plaintiff is alluded to a number of times as the murderer of Stephen Smith. And I'm just going to pause real quick. This is my opinion, not the verbiage of the lawsuit or the complaint at this point. But I agree. I could not agree more. I have not consumed any of the content that is out there about Alec Murdaugh because it is really bad. A lot of it is really bad. A lot of it is very suggestive, highly opinionated. Unfortunately, a lot of people who kind of dug their feet into having success in the reporting arena when it comes to reporting on crime, they lost their way in a really big way, unfortunately, and they began not basing things on fact and not basing things on what actually mattered and what could be proven at the end of the day. Um, things got things got what I would consider to be fairly defamatory. In the United States, it is no secret that people can be quite juvenile about their right to free speech and taunt other people with that right, whether they have the proof in front of them or not. If any of these people knew exactly what happened to Stephen Smith, we wouldn't be here right now. We would be taking that before the proper authorities. None of them have the solid proof, and there's no reason to report on it as if you do. There's also no reason to bring up Buster Murdaugh's name in every single report you do about Stephen Smith. As I said in the beginning of this, there are a wide variety of advocates who would be happy to report on the death of Stephen Smith and try to help find answers. You do not have to use the Murdaugh name in everything you do from South Carolina here on out in order to get it seen and viewed and appreciated, and to get answers from that and support for the family. It's not necessary. Okay, so let's move on. These statements about the plaintiff are defamatory and falsely accuse the plaintiff of committing a crime of moral turpitude. The false statements have been published to hundreds of thousands, if not millions, definitely millions in my opinion, of viewers who watch the show, including viewers in South Carolina, and the defamatory statements continue to be republished as of the filing of this action on a broad array of streaming platforms and channels owned by the defendant, Warner Brothers Discovery. Defendant Warner Brothers Discovery Inc. has hundreds of thousands of subscribers to its Discovery Plus, Investigation Discovery, and other streaming and broadcasting services and channels within South Carolina. They claim they were aware of the acute regional interest in the series and intended for South Carolina viewers to watch Murdaugh Murders Deadly Dynasty. Defendant Warner Brothers Discovery purposefully and specifically directed marketing and advertising efforts for the series to South Carolina citizens. Defendant Blackfin Inc. created and produced the series Murdaugh Murders Deadly Dynasty, and in doing so, published the above described defamatory statements concerning plaintiff and profited from the defendant Warner Brothers Discovery republishing of the statements. In creating and producing the series, the defendant Blackfin engaged in persistent series development, investigation, and filming activities within the state to create an artistic work that would have specific appeal to viewers within the state and would be consumed by viewers within the state. Beginning on November 3rd, 2022, the defendants, Warner Brothers Discovery Inc. and Warner Brothers Media Entertainment pages, or it says Warner Media Entertainment pages, began distributing and streaming a 3-part series to the public on the Murdaugh family titled Low Country, The Murdaugh Dynasty, through the defendant Warner Brothers Discovery Inc.'s platform HBO Max, now entitled Max, throughout the entire country and specifically within this state. The series publishes false statements that suggest that the plaintiff, along with others, murdered Stephen Smith by striking him with a baseball bat. A sequence in the show accuses the plaintiff of killing Stephen Smith because of his sexual identity and further insinuates that the plaintiff killed Stephen Smith in relation to a romantic relationship between the plaintiff and Smith. These statements are untrue in their entirety. These statements are defamatory in that they falsely accuse the plaintiff of committing murder. The false statements have been published to hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of viewers who watch the show, including viewers of South Carolina, and the defamatory statements continue to be republished as of the filing of this action. I just want to say, not everybody has the money to do this, right? this isn't something everyone has access to. To put together a lawsuit like this, a lot of work has gone into figuring out whether this should be done or not. But it always has a ripple effect. If this wins in court, it could be a win for a lot of people, a lot of families who are falsely accused of doing something horrific to their children just because their child is missing, and maybe they're not playing the game of doing everything that the public demands of them, like speaking to this person, or why aren't they talking to this person, or why didn't they do. People are very quick to jump to claiming that somebody has done something horrific without having the facts. And I would love to see a lot less of that. These statements are defamatory in that they falsely accuse the plaintiff of committing murder. Again, it mentions that they have been published to hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of viewers who watched the shows, including viewers in South Carolina. It also claims the same for Campfire Studios, that they have been redistributing, republishing Discovery statements. On February 22nd, 2023, Netflix began streaming a series entitled Murdaugh Murders, A Southern Scandal, which depicts a young man with red hair carrying a baseball bat. The plaintiff has red hair, and it is readily ascertainable from the content of the series that the creators were depicting the plaintiff as the murderer of Stephen Smith, which is just horrific. And having an attorney working for the Smith family who consistently brings Buster's name back up doesn't help anything. The series publishes statements such as, "Everyone keeps coming up to me and saying it was the Murdaugh boys." And listening to these statements, it is pretty clear Stephen Smith's death is intertwined with the Murdaughs. The series falsely contains statements that the plaintiff was engaged in a romantic relationship with Stephen Smith, and that it was the plaintiff and maybe two other individuals who killed him. These statements are defamatory in that they falsely accuse the plaintiff of committing these acts. The false statements were published to hundreds of thousands, if not millions. Again, same verbiage here. And then Netflix is also involved with Murdaugh Murders Deadly Dynasty, purposefully and specifically directed marketing and advertising efforts for the series in South Carolina. The same is said for Cinemart, LLC. And then let's go down here to Michael M. DeWitt Jr., the editor of the Hampton County Guardian, a local weekly newspaper covering Hampton County. Mr. DeWitt appeared in the Netflix series Murdaugh Murders, A Southern Scandal, in both his individual capacity and within the scope and course of his agency as the editor of the Hampton County Guardian. In the documentary, he states the following. Number one, we were hearing all of these rumors about a possible connection. Number two, there is some truth to it. Number three, we could not put the Murdaugh name in the story unless we wanted to face lawsuits. We said a prominent, well-known family was rumored to be involved. Everyone knew who we were talking about. We published the story and we waited. People would come up to me in the Piggly Wiggly and pat me on the back. We're so thankful you had the courage to run the story. We did everything but put the Murdaugh name in the story. And he stated, I began to have a bad taste in my mouth about the members of the Murdaugh family, as many people did in the community. So, he basically admits in that, we didn't say his name, but we knew everybody would know. So there's probably going to be some level of intent there that doesn't look so good for Mr. DeWitt. But essentially, they did not name him technically. But, how far are you going to try and push something? Especially when his own words, he said there is some truth to it. Okay, some. What does that mean? Does that mean that there were certain friends, certain people that Buster Murdaugh was also around, that Stephen Smith was around. Yet, which part is there truth to? Because a lot of things have been alleged. So it's very interesting. I do find that, yeah, it's problematic. You're putting a lot of weight, a lot of public conjecture out there about something that people have no idea what actually is the full truth of. It's very dangerous. We have cases all the time where, yeah, we know certain people have been implicated. We know that certain people have been mentioned or are associated with the person, but we don't put that out there because it's highly defamatory. It's wrong to do, to put a narrative out there like that unless you've done your due diligence, investigating and kind of trying to get to the bottom of what the truth of that is. And yeah, it sucks because sometimes it delays justice, trying to vet all of these facts and figure out who knows what and where we can pull all this information together. But it is what it is. You don't completely defame somebody in the process of trying to find the actual truth. Unless any of these people have some actual facts to bring to the table, then no, they do not need to be putting any kind of narratives out attached to anybody. When put in context with the remainder of the documentary, it is clear that Mr. DeWitt is falsely accusing the plaintiff of being involved in the murder of Stephen Smith. He may have gotten away with, this is my opinion, he may have gotten away with this had he not gone on to Netflix and made these statements. Anyhow, Mr. DeWitt's false statements defamed the plaintiff and damaged his reputation. Defendants' publications are unprivileged or exceed the scope of any privilege recognized by the South Carolina or federal law. The statements were made with reckless indifference to the truth. In publishing these statements, defendants purposefully ignored information demonstrating their falsity that was readily available to and within the defendant's knowledge, including information that the individuals unrelated to the plaintiff were responsible for Stephen Smith's death. All of the above described statements were defamatory and falsely accused the plaintiff of being involved in the murder of Stephen Smith as a result of the specific false and defamatory statements made by the defendants and republished by the defendants. The plaintiff's reputation has been irreparably damaged, and I imagine it has been, and he has suffered mental anguish. Plaintiff is entitled to actual damages and punitive damages because of the reckless conduct of the defendants in falsely accusing him of being involved in the murder of Stephen Smith. So that is what is going forward, and I am very anxious to see how this plays out. I hope that maybe it even creates some change for how these things are being addressed, because people are getting very loose with what they accuse people of, what they say, how they're painting their narratives, and how they're taking little pieces of information without doing their due diligence and just putting it out there. It's highly irresponsible.